The thing about Heather's story is that it is so indicative. It is so indicative of how BC has lost its way in the past 8 years. Directed by this government, we are stumbling on the democratic path. Because rather than prioritize people, which, as I said, is the essence of democracy, they focus on bottom lines, numbers, and money. They have got blinders on, and people don't matter. Repeatedly shutting down debate, instituting major policy decisions and financial schemes without any discussion, blindsiding the entire province, offering information incongruent with the facts, and breaking promises are the legacy of the last 8 years, right alongside the most humiliating position as the worst province in Canada for child poverty 5 years running. And then we have homelessness. And this is a particular issue that I've worked on for several years, whether running a local food bank and feeding those, and those numbers are going up. There's some, in the last few months, it's been some of the highest numbers that our local food banks and soup kitchens in Nelson, British Columbia, has ever seen. Over 1,000 visits in a town of 10,000. Homelessness has gone up by nearly 400% under their watch. I've heard other members across the floor tell me, aren't we so lucky to be in British Columbia as opposed to other countries like those in Africa. I've worked in Africa. I've worked with people living in poverty in Africa. I've worked with people living in poverty here in North America, right here in our rural communities. And poverty is not acceptable, whether it's on this continent, on this province, or whether it's in Africa. And this government should be absolutely ashamed that they've let it explode in the last 8 years. What kind of measure of prosperity do these people have, Honourable Speaker? What kind of measure of prosperity when the numbers are escalating, exploding at exponential rates? And people are suffering and living in cardboard boxes, under bridges, and that is not a measure that we should be proud of when we start measuring the wealth and benefits of our province. And yes, those people do matter. They matter. And I could only wish, Honourable Speaker, that the people across the way thought so. And it is clear from this summer and this speech from the throne that the Liberals are staying on the same course of devastation and suffering for some of the most vulnerable people, and they're increasing that number, and that's exactly what their plan is for the next 4 years, and it's very clear from this speech from the throne. And because the care for people has been so minimal under this government, it is clear that they do not run a democracy, that they're not interested in running a democracy. What they're interested in, and what they only wish to do, is run an economy. And you know what, Honourable Speaker? They have run an economy right into the ground. Yeah. But the funny thing is, Honourable Speaker, that is exactly, running an economy into the ground is exactly what happens when you ignore people in favour of dollars, especially dollars for your corporate friends. And forgetting that everyone, every single person matters, and that the economy is about wealth for all, not merely a few friends, you create an unsustainable system that costs us taxpayers more. It costs British Columbians more to leave people homeless rather than to house them. Their own studies tell us that. It costs British Columbia more to leave seniors neglected than to increase home support. It costs BC more to cut student aid and make post-secondary education inaccessible rather than train people and prepare our economy for the jobs of tomorrow. And it costs citizens more when you give away their control over resources, privatize our utilities, and denigrate environmental standards so that they are meaningless for future generations. And, Honourable Speaker, it costs BC more to slash public, quality childcare, community supports, and job-creating arts funding and tourism funding. That's what costs BC more. To this list of costing us more, I'll tell you what the voters of Nelson Creston said, and what they said loud and clear, Honourable Speaker, was no more. No more excuses for a lack of a surgeon at Kootenay Lake Hospital. No more private power production off of our rivers and creeks. No more neglect of farmers and agriculture. And no more careless shoot-from-the-hip governing. And if they could have, Honourable Speaker, if the voters of Nelson Creston could have said this during the election, like so many others in British Columbia today, they would have said no way and no more to the Liberals' latest tax grab, the HST. Instead of the tired, old way of business put forward so clearly in the speech from the throne, Nelson Creston voted for a new way of thinking and a new type of leadership. A new leadership that believes in a society where everyone has the opportunity to realize their right to live in dignity. A new leadership that believes in an economy that nurtures our well-being and creates environmental sustainability. A new leadership that does that environmental sustainability and at the very same time puts people before profits. A new leadership that values public control over public resources to protect the public interest. The Nelson Creston voters voted for a new leadership built on principles instead of corporate persuasion.